Okay, so today we're really diving into some heavy stuff with these excerpts from 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do. It's impossible not to be moved by Amy Morin's stories. Like she shares some really deep personal experiences, especially when it comes to loss.
Yeah, you're right. Morin really doesn't shy away from hardship, but I think that's what makes this book so powerful.
Mhm.
It's not just about recounting the tough stuff; it's about that transformation that comes after. She kind of lays out this roadmap for building up your mental resilience, and it's all about the choices we make, one at a time.
And she walks the walk too. It's
Yeah,
not just theoretical, like with that story about young Jack, the boy who got hit by the school bus.
yeah,
I mean, talk about a tough situation. It'd be so easy to get stuck in that fear and self-pity, right?
right.
But his family made a decision, a conscious choice to focus on his strength, celebrating his victory over the accident.
Yeah, they reframe the whole experience,
Yeah.
and that changed everything.
Exactly. Reframing. Instead of being a victim, he was empowered to believe in his own recovery. It makes you think, how often do we let setbacks define us when we could be finding the strength to redefine them?
It's all about locus of control, right?
Yeah,
Jack's family, they shifted his from feeling powerless to feeling like he could take charge of his own healing. And that's something we can all learn from.
totally. So how do we apply that to our own lives? Like we can all probably think of a setback we faced. Did we see ourselves as helpless or did we find that strength to navigate the situation?
I know I can think of times I haven't responded the way I wish I had.
It's a journey for sure. Nobody's perfect at this. But Moran's own journey writing this book is a great example. Think about it. She was dealing with her father-in-law's terminal illness when she started on these 13 things.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's right.
Heavy stuff. But instead of just giving in to despair, she chose to be proactive, focusing on our mindset. You know, the one thing she actually had control over.
And this is where it gets really interesting. She actually compares how she reacted to her father-in-law's anticipated passing with her reactions to the sudden deaths of her mother and her husband.
Oh, wow. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, and you can see the difference. With her father-in-law, you see the growth of her mental strength. It's like she's consciously applying those 13 things. It wasn't just a list anymore. It was a practice, something she actively used to get through a really difficult time. It's like she was actively building resilience.
That's so empowering, though. It means we can get better at handling those curveballs life throws our way.
Exactly. Resilience is a muscle we can build, not something we're just born with. So let's dive into the first few of these things and unpack that, because some of them seem so simple on the surface, but when you actually try to put them into practice,
Oh, I bet. Like that first one, not feeling sorry for yourself. Sounds easy, right?
easier said than done, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Definitely. But as we saw with Jack's story, it all starts with shifting your perspective. Even when things are really tough, we still have choices about how we're going to respond.
Yeah, and a great example of that is the story of Stephen McDonald, this police officer who was paralyzed by a teenage shooter, and he actually chose forgiveness over anger and resentment. Think about that for a second.
It makes you examine your own capacity for forgiveness, that's for sure.
It really does. But you see, McDonald, he recognized that if he held on to that anger and bitterness, he'd just be giving his attacker power over him, even from prison. Forgiveness, as hard as it was, became his way of reclaiming his own power, his own agency.
Wow. Powerful stuff. So it's about letting go of the resentment and making the choice to move forward.
Exactly. And speaking of letting go, that's the next thing that really resonated with me. Not shying away from change. Because it's so easy to just get stuck in our comfort zones, even when they're not really making us happy.
Oh, tell me about it. Change can be scary. But Morin tells that amazing story of Mary Deming. She channeled the grief over her mother's death and created Seymour Pink, this whole movement against breast cancer. Talk about turning a negative into a positive.
It's incredible. She could have let that grief consume her, but instead she turned her pain into action. It's like, what could we accomplish if we all channeled our tough experiences into something so positive?
That actually ties back to what we were just talking about with locus of control. It's about realizing that even when life throws us those curveballs, we always have choices in how we respond. We can be passive, or we can be active participants in shaping our own lives.
Even amidst the chaos, yeah. And sometimes, that means facing our fears head on instead of letting them control us. You know what I mean? That kind of leads us to the next thing. Not focusing on what you can't control. That one can be huge.
Yeah.
Especially these days. So much anxiety swirling around.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. I'm a world-class worrier myself. This one really hit home for me. I don't know if you remember, but Morin tells that story about Jet the dog who was terrified of certain floors.
Oh, yeah.
It's hilarious, but also so relatable. Like, so much of our fear doesn't even make sense. We create these rules in our heads that just end up limiting us without us even realizing it.
It's like Jet being afraid of perfectly good floors. It's a total metaphor for how we get in our own way. We work ourselves up over things we have absolutely zero control over, and then that anxiety just takes over and controls our decisions. It's like being stuck in a mental traffic jam.
Oh my gosh, yes, it's so true. Have you ever noticed yourself doing that? Like, what are your scary floors, so to speak?
Oh, all the time. But speaking of getting stuck, Morin's story about holding on to her late husband's things for years after he passed away, that one really got to me. It's just so human, that need to hold on to the past,
Yeah.
even when it hurts.
It's so powerful how those physical objects become these reminders and how hard it can be to let go.
It is. And you know what Morin realized? It wasn't about forgetting him or letting go of his memory. It was about honoring him by actually living fully in the present moment.
Yeah.
It's like, what time capsules are we holding on to? What would it look like to finally let go of the past and be present?
That really resonates with me. What would it look like to step into the present moment? We talk about decluttering our homes, but what about our minds?
Exactly. Sometimes you got to make space for new experiences and new possibilities. You know what I mean? It's like recognizing that, okay, the past made us who we are, but it doesn't have to define who we become. It doesn't have to control us.
So true. And that actually makes me think about another thing so many of us struggle with. That pressure to please everyone, often at the expense of our own happiness. Like, we're always trying to live up to other people's expectations instead of staying true to ourselves and our own values.
That's what not worrying about pleasing everyone is all about.
Yeah.
Morin uses a really interesting example. She talks about Megan, who was like the classic people pleaser, and she contrasts her with Craig Newmark, who founded Craigslist,
Oh, yeah.
and how he resisted monetizing the platform for the longest time, prioritizing the sense of community over profits, which is kind of countercultural when you think about it.
Big time. So are you saying we should all be more like Craig Newmark?
Well, I think it's more about recognizing that authenticity and knowing your values, those things, can be so much more powerful than just trying to get everyone to like you. Did you ever think about that, reading about Newmark's approach?
It definitely makes you think about success in a different way, for sure.
For sure. Newmark understood that trying to please everybody would have basically undermined Craigslist's whole purpose.
Mhm.
Right? So it's a good reminder that we can't be everything to everyone. And that's okay. Actually, it's more than okay. It's essential. Define what matters most to why you, and then let that guide your decisions, even if it means going against the grain sometimes.
And sometimes honoring what matters most means taking time for ourselves, even if we're the kind of people who thrive on being around others. Like Morin talks about the importance of solitude for reflection and growth, which can be hard in today's world, you know? We're constantly bombarded with information and connection and stimulation.
That's true. We're always on the go. It's like we've forgotten how to just be. But even taking a few minutes of quiet time, just to think or meditate, it can make a world of difference. It's like hitting the reset button on your brain.
It's funny how those few minutes can make such a difference, right? Like hitting the mental reset button, we all need that sometimes. And speaking of resetting, that whole idea of redefining success, I feel like that's a big part of Morin's message. It's not just about checking boxes or external validation. It's about figuring out what really matters to you and making sure your life is aligned with those values.
Absolutely. And sometimes that means challenging that competitive voice we all have in our heads, the one that's always comparing us to everyone else. Morin actually uses a kind of surprising example to illustrate this. She talks about the candy guys, Milton Hershey and H.B. Reese.
Oh, yeah. Chocolate empires.
Exactly. And they actually cooperated with each other, which led to both of them becoming incredibly successful.
Wow, I didn't realize that. It's so counterintuitive out though, right? We're often taught to see the world as this zero-sum game, like someone else's win has to be our loss.
It's true. It's like that scarcity mindset that there's not enough success to go around. But Hershey and Reese, they proved that wrong. They realized they could actually achieve way more by working together.
So it's about shifting that perspective, seeing collaboration and mutual support as sources of strength instead of threats.
Exactly. There's enough success to go around. Seeing other people thrive, it can be inspiring. Instead of feeling threatened, we can choose to learn from them and celebrate their wins.
I love that. Celebrate their wins. And speaking of wins, Morin tells that story about James Dyson, the guy who invented the bagless vacuum cleaner.
Oh, yeah. 5,000 prototypes.
5,000. Can you imagine? Talk about perseverance. Most of us would have given up after 5, let alone 5,000.
It's incredible, right? But that's the thing. Dyson, he didn't see those failures as the end guy. He saw them as feedback, as stepping stones on the path to success. He was willing to keep iterating, keep experimenting until he got it right.
5,000 times. I mean, what could we achieve if we all approached challenges with that kind of mindset? It makes you wonder what dreams we've given up on too soon just because we were afraid to fail.
I know, right? What if we all decided to see ourselves as works in progress? Always learning, always growing, always capable of achieving more than we think we can.
It's about shifting from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. It's not about being perfect. It's about being open to the journey. And that's what I appreciate so much about Morin's book, 13 Things. It's not just a self-help book. It's a call to action. It's a reminder that building mental strength is a lifelong practice.
It's about showing up for ourselves even when it's tough, choosing to face life's challenges head on with courage and resilience.
And sometimes a little bit of grace for ourselves along the way. It's been great diving into all this with you today. A lot to think about for sure.
Absolutely.
So for everyone listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What one small step will you take today to flex that mental strength muscle? Thanks for joining us.